know your value, know how much you should be paid, how you should be treated, how you should be spoken to. Because as difficult as it is in the moment to do that, I always find that it's worth, on the ride home when you have that pit in your stomach, like, I should have done this and I should have done that. And I missed the opportunity. That feeling is always way worse than in the moment when you just take on the fear.
Hey everybody, I'm Laurie Brudeman, and this is Punk Rock HR. In each episode, we take a realistic but slightly cynical approach to fixing work, bringing you raw and honest conversations with disruptors, innovators, and even random working people like you and me with one goal: to reshape the workplace as you know it. But sometimes we take a break from all that and talk about real life, like relationships and well-being and kids and animals. And along the way, we drop a few F-bombs too. Whether you're an HR professional trying to do the right thing, a leader looking to connect with their people, or just fascinated by workplace dynamics, this is your destination to fix work once and for all. On this episode, we're chatting with Angela Cheng-Cimini. She's an HR leader, AAPI champion, keynote speaker, and SVP of Talent in CHRO at Harvard Business Publishing. With a 30-year track record, Angela's expertise helps businesses thrive. So do you want insights from a global leader who's seen a lot but is still passionate about shaping the future of work through HR? Well, sit back and enjoy this fun talk with Angela on this week's Punk Rock HR. Hey, Angela, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Laurie, for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, we're really pleased to talk to you today about your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge of both the world of work and the world of human resources. But before we get started, can you tell everybody who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. So I am a wife, married my college sweetheart, a mother of two fabulous adult children who are amazing people in their own right. And I'm a 30-year career HR professional.
And when did you get started in human resources? Was it, after a stint in school, in between school? Like, how does this work out for you?
As a lot of things do, my dad decided it made a lot of sense. He was helping me figure out what I wanted to do, because who knows what they want to do when they're 17 or 18. He said, here's this great program. Why don't you apply? I went and I just fell in love with the curriculum. OD, labor relations, even economics and statistics, although those were not my strong suits. And then I got a series of internships in human resources and realized that I'd found my calling. So I've been in this discipline and have never looked back.
Wow. So you're Gen X like I am. And when we entered into the workforce, we didn't have a lot of competition. There was a low birth rate around the time of our generation. And so when I looked around human resources, there weren't a lot of people my age doing that job. It was mostly boomers at that point who were very career focused. What were your early days in human resources like?
So the undergraduate program that I came out of was something called industrial and labor relations. And at the time, you either went into HR, went into organized labor, or went into law school. So the cohort that I went to school with and graduated from were all very, oriented around human resources. A lot of them were, and in any case. So I joined organizations that had a real deep commitment to the function. And so I joined with other folks who were entering the field at the same time that I was. So I think I had a different experience than you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. No, I was planning on going to law school and decided I didn't want to take on any more student debt after graduation. And I thought, well, I'll work for a little bit. And if I want to go back to law school, I'll have an organization pay for it. And I did an internship at a candy company in the HR department. And I was the youngest person at the entire facility. And I think, I was in the Midwest, in a small town in St. Louis. So it's not like a huge industrial thriving metropolis, but it was a really good lesson on the humanity in the workforce. At a very young age, I saw issues around, interpersonal relationships. There were a lot of immigrants. It just was fascinating. And it was a union environment. I don't know. What was your early HR experience like?
Wow. So mine was a lot cushier. My first job was in a corporate office, right? With I had my own office, right? I mean, who has that these days? So I was much more insulated. But I think to your point about humanity, it teaches you something about how you bring about influence when you don't have the rank or the tenure to do that. Because in human resources, right, we're doing a lot of coaching and a lot of counseling, and people would look at me like, who are you to tell me how I'm supposed to manage my people? Well, actually, I think I have some insights that might be really helpful to you, even though I haven't walked a mile in your shoes yet. And so really learning how to drive influence without having the formal authority to do that has been a skill that has served me really well.
Driving influence is easier said than done, and it's easier for some people than other people just by nature of their birth, what they look like, their height, their gender, their race, right? And so I'm a 5 foot tall white woman who was early in my career heavily tattooed and pierced. I had a certain look to myself, and earned the nickname Punk Rock HR as a
Oh, makes
not,
sense. It
yeah,
all makes sense.
not as a positive name, by the way, but driving influence has been a challenge for me my whole entire life. And now is a little bit easier now that I've hit middle age. I wonder what it was like for you when you entered the workforce. How did you get to the position where you felt comfortable being influential?
So that's a great origin story for me. Very early in my career, I was taken to task by a very senior level executive. He just laid me out. And in that moment, I decided, well, I'm either going to lose my job or I'm going to save my dignity. And maybe they were going to be mutually inclusive or maybe not. And I said, you know what? There's really only one person who can talk to me like that, and it's my dad. And you're not my dad. So I'm going to take my things and go back to my office, and you tell me whether or not I still have a job. I lifted it to my vice president of HR, who must have advocated for me because later that afternoon, I got an apology from that sales executive. And he was sort of known to be a bully around the office. And I think I learned my power at a very young age. And because I was often the only female, certainly only person of color. And so not cut from the typical cloth, right? And as you probably know really well. And I'm only 5'4", so I'm also not towering over anybody. But I think when you can understand that at the end of the day, you are your own best advocate and you can either fail yourself or do right by yourself, that's really freeing. It's really empowering because I am of enough privilege to be able to walk away from a job that doesn't understand my value. And I understand that a lot of people don't have that luxury and that freedom. But for those of us who do, we have little excuse to tolerate that kind of abuse.
I sometimes think that fear of losing a job is overstated. And I, like you, learned at a very young age to tell people the way they were speaking to me was hurtful and also unacceptable. And then to lean into the silence and see what happens. And I have said this enough in my life to know I was not going to get fired for saying that. Because when you couch it with a feeling and a boundary, and you lean into that silence, people often recognize what they've done wrong in the moment, or at least they'll come back and they will apologize later. So I'm glad that you had that experience. Do you teach that now? I mean, I find it like my life's mission to tell people you are not going to get bullied in the office, right? We're going to work on this. So how do you incorporate that in your leadership style?
I'm certainly doing that now more outside of work, I think. Although there are opportunities for me to impart that wisdom here at work, but I'm doing a lot now in the later stages of my career to sort of pay it forward and pay it back. And so I speak to a lot of early career folks. In fact, I was invited to talk to a club in California of Girls Can Finance. And these were 14, 15-year-olds, right, who were just looking for a senior executive to come give them some life wisdom. And what I told them was know your value. Know how much you should be paid, how you should be treated, how you should be spoken to, because as difficult as it is in the moment to do that, I always find that it's worth, on the ride home when you have that pit in your stomach, I'm like, I should have done this and I should have done that. And I missed the opportunity. And that feeling is always way worse than in the moment when you just take on the fear.
Yeah. Well said. Really well said. Well, thank you for that. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about human resources because the HR that you and I entered into, in the 90s and the 2000s is completely different than the HR we have today. So, what are some of the shifts and maybe what's a story that you see or that you can tell us that really demonstrates the shift of how things are different today?
Laurie, I have to think about that because I was fortunate enough to join an organization and it was Frito-Lay, part of PepsiCo at the time. And I think they had a really progressive HR function. The head of HR was definitely seen as a business partner. And in fact, they taught me sort of the triangle, right? So HR should be change agent, business partner, and technical expert. And that was sort of the foundation for how I thought about HR all along. It was never just technical expert, like I know how to do benefits and pay people. It was really think about the business holistically. So I think even 30 years ago, there were organizations that understood what we could bring to the table. Fast forward, and I think the pandemic really accelerated that for those organizations who were still left hanging on and wanted to box us and put baby in a corner and treat us like personnel. Like they didn't know what they were doing. And so they figured, well, we'll just throw it over there because, they've got human in their title. And for those who rose to the challenge, I think it was a real opportunity to demonstrate the power that was there all along. So I think sometimes out of crisis, right, there is tremendous opportunity. But I do think that there have always been organizations that really understood what HR was there for, and that it long stopped being personnel.
I love that perspective. It's very optimistic and also very accurate. I think you're right. There are organizations that did believe in the power and witnessed it firsthand of human resources. But I mean, let's be honest, they were few and far between if we look at the broader landscape of work. I mean, the past 30 years of work, we've not solved the wage gap. We've not solved racism, sexism, homophobia. We've not solved toxic workplaces. I could go on and on. And so for every one organization that really believes in the harmonious way that HR and leadership should work together, there are others that still sees HR as like the thing we must have because the workforce needs a mom or a dad. I don't know. What's your reaction to that?
So that's so well timed. So this morning I spent time with a recruiter, and she said that she is struggling to find HR leaders who are strategic. So I think some of that is on us as a function. That if we don't recognize how we're falling short, then how do we get others to like that's not their job, right? Their job is not to say this is why you're valuable. It's on us, I think, to demonstrate why we are valuable and then to keep demonstrating value so we keep the seat at the table. So I think it's a little bit of a reciprocity thing because crises don't come along. Well, they seem to be coming along more frequently, right? But we can't wait for those to be the reason that we suddenly get invited in. So I would look at ourselves.
Interesting. I was thinking as you were speaking that so many of us in the world of human resources come from underrepresented communities or historically marginalized communities. And sometimes I think we're not seen as strategic, even though we are, because of the biases that leaders who happen to be from majority communities come from and have. So if you're a plant manager who comes from one background and you're little Laurie Rudiman who shows up another way with all of her education and all of her potential and all of her, young wisdom, I think there's a bias that comes into play. Of course, this individual is not going to see me as strategic, right? And so I just wonder if it's not that we don't bring things to the table and we're not communicating, but it's the bias of leadership that gets in the way and it creates this weird double tax, this double bind. What's your reaction to that?
Hi, I'm Stephen Rothberg.
And I'm Jeanette Leeds.
And together, we're the co-hosts of the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Are you involved in hiring dozens or even hundreds of employees a year? If so, you know that the typical sourcing tools, tactics, and strategies, they just don't scale.
Yeah. Our bi-weekly podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high volume hiring.
Make sure to subscribe today.
Well, I think if we're to believe that the bias can never be undone, then we've hit the end of the road right before we even started the journey. And I've been in that shoe, right? I've been in a manufacturing plant in the northeast corner of Connecticut where there's not much going on, not unionized. But, that manufacturing plant was sort of, it employed most of the people there, very, very provincial town. And I walk in with my highfalutin college degree thinking I know everything, right? And I learned pretty quickly that I had to establish my credibility. And it was one of the places where I really honed my communication skills to be able to read the audience, find a way to connect, and bring, I think, as you said before, the humanity of the function and why we're really there. It's there to be an employee advocate. And so they needed to believe that I believed that that was also my role. And pretty soon I was out there wearing my hairnet, going on third, second, first shift, like asking people about their kids and what was up, and then helping them to walk through a progressive discipline because they made a mistake. But it was built on a relationship of trust that took time to build.
It's interesting you chose the word time because I think there's, and maybe rightly so, a lack of patience in the younger early careerists in human resources. And I think it's fair. It's like, why do I have to prove to you that I'm credible? Why do I have to prove to you that I'm strategic? I've worked at X, Y, and Z organization. I'm an educated Black woman, Hispanic woman, gay man. This is how I identify. And if you don't think I'm credible and you don't think I know my job, that's on you. But on the other hand, trust is never really easily earned in any relationship. So, can you talk to me a little bit about the patience that's required in the role of human resources and I don't know, what you see and what you feel with the younger generation of workers?
Oh, that's a whole new thing to unpack as I'm actually preparing for a talk. And what I'm going to be talking about is sort of hyper personalization of the employee experience. And the generation effect that we're seeing right now influences that a lot, right? They are the generation of instant gratification. I want my shampoo delivered to me now. I want to watch that movie now. I want to be promoted now, right? There's a very little sense of I need to earn it. I need to put my time in. And so that colors everything. And I want to be able to communicate to you only 144 words. I'm not going to read a long form piece in HBR. So there's all these things that are affecting how people consume and process information that doesn't translate to how relationships are born and cultivated in the real world. And I think they can only just learn that the hard way, right? That's the difference between experience and wisdom. Like I can tell you, don't put your hand on a hot stove. You would do right to believe me. But if you insist on putting your hand on the hot stove, then that's an experience that you're going to get, even though I imparted my wisdom. And I think to your point about how do we tell people that it's just going to take time, you're either going to believe me or you're going to find out for yourself because you can't accelerate most of those kinds of relationships, especially when you are young and cocky.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. And yet I remember being young and being like, dang it. I mean, I wanted instant shampoo delivery. I just didn't know it could exist, right? I wanted to communicate in 140 letters or 140 characters, and people were like, "Nuh-uh, that's not allowed." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to be fired." Okay, So I, if only I had been born in a different generation, I was right for this current generation. But I definitely understand questioning the way things have been done in the past because if things were so great, a lot of the problems that we're asking current HR professionals to solve would have already been solved by our great approach to being patient and taking time. So I think there's probably wisdom to learn from both extremes of the generations in the workforce, but boy,
Always. I mean,
messy.
every generation thinks that the generation before had it easier, right? And that they're the first to experience discourse or, dissent. I mean, history repeats itself. I think it just shows up differently.
I wonder what you think about the advent of, the social web and social media. I won't even get into generative AI, but over the past, 20 years, we've seen social media disrupt the way we've done recruiting, the way we've done hiring, the way we've talked about compensation. So can you talk to me a little bit about the advent of social media in your own career?
Well, it certainly has made talent acquisition a lot easier. I think it has become an Achilles heel for some employer brands, right? Because the conduit to badmouth an employer is immediate. Like I had a terrible experience. I'm going to blast it out on Glassdoor. I'm going to post it on my LinkedIn. And oftentimes you can do that completely anonymously, right? So you can't question the source. There's almost never an opportunity for you to engage in a conversation about tell me why you feel that way and what could we learn from that, right? Okay, understand that you've already left. What can I learn? Like that opportunity has passed me by. I don't even get the chance. So I think it means less room for error, which is not a good thing, right? I think we learn so much when we make mistakes, when we have the opportunity to have the conversation. And when it's just one way, like social media is, or it's self-propagating, meaning that the people who see my Facebook posts probably already think the way that I do. That's why I'm friends with them. And the people who see my LinkedIn posts also probably see the world similarly. And those who comment, who I don't know, I probably tend to discount, right? That's just back to your point about natural biases. What we should be doing is maybe seeing social media for the good that it can do, which is it opens up horizons to different perspectives and facilitates conversations that you wouldn't have otherwise. But it seems to be doing so much more harm than good that we've lost the plot a little.
I think you're right. There was a moment during like Me Too and even during the beginning of the pandemic with, the racial reckoning that we had in this country that I thought finally we're having a national conversation. But I'm also old enough to know that the pendulum swings and it swung back and it swung back hard. And it's like, me what? Nobody's talking about Me Too. And we've moved on from George Floyd, and now the pendulum is swinging the other way to like pulling back on DEI initiatives. So talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing when it comes to DEI programs. And I don't know, do you have any concerns, any fears?
Well, Lori, I think I'm seeing the same thing you are, right? Which is that organizations are an inflection point and they have to make a choice, right? Are they going to continue in their commitment and hopefully even double down? Or are they going to use this as an opportunity to walk away from something that maybe they didn't really ever really believe was a thing they needed to do anyway? I mean, I personally feel that there are some universities who are actually gleeful that they don't have to worry about affirmative action. They can just pick who they want, right? Like now those shackles are off. So I'm part of an organization that is going to be doubling down on our DEI efforts. We're going to have to be more careful around how we navigate those waters because there are people who are laying traps and waiting to say, gotcha. But I believe that we're smarter and we're better intended than those people are. Time will show that we're on the right side of history on this one. But we just have to be patient.
Well, that's really interesting that you talk about doubling down because I hear that language from a lot of human resources leaders. My company is doubling down. We're not going to walk away from this. And I wonder, what does that mean? What does it mean to double down? Can you give us an example or tell us a story of what that means?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it means not just that we're going to continue our DEI programs, but that we're actually going to talk about it. We're going to teach others. We're going to be the role model for that. We're going to put more money, more resources behind it. It's not going to be status quo because actually it is now more urgent because we have to pick up the slack from those organizations that are walking away from it.
Well, and I wonder too if this is a long game that doesn't play out in the next couple of years. To your earlier point, we're going to have to see where this goes. Do you think these efforts of doubling down will pay off? Will they pay dividends?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to know by November. Because I think legislation will just accelerate or it'll hit a roadblock depending on who sits in Pennsylvania Avenue next year. But I would like to think that the efforts of organizations like ours is making a difference. But when they go somewhere else or when they go to buy a house or when they try to take out a loan, if those structures continue to have bias and in fact if they get worse, then that negates some of the work that we can do. So it's such a much bigger problem than just what any employer or even a collective of employers can do. It requires a really rethinking, and I think in some instances a complete dismantling of how we've built our society. And that's just so far out of our control that I kind of don't even like to go to those places because it can just really spiral into this terrible rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I hear you. And we on this podcast have had discussions with individuals about how systems basically need to be burnt down. But in the process of burning it down, you also don't control what's going to be built up in its place. And so that can be very scary. Also, in dismantling these systems, people can get hurt. Even when you're well-intentioned, people can get hurt. And so the question becomes, how do you do this in a responsible way? But to your point, it can't just be in the workplace. It has to be elsewhere. And are you optimistic? Do you see other organizations, other institutions making commitments, anything where you're like, oh yeah, we're not alone?
Well, it's interesting that you say institutions, because one of the things that I think that you've probably observed as I have is over the last decade, say, employers are increasingly called upon to provide, right? So you want benefits? You better have a job. You plan on retiring one day? You better have a plan through your job. Are you lonely? Your employer can cure for that, right? Like these are all these expectations on the employer-employee relationship that not only were non-existent, we were asked to not go to those places. Like that was really inappropriate to ask people about, you're going through a divorce. How can I help you? Like we were taught, don't go there, right? And now if we don't go there, it's like, well, you're bad employer. Like you don't care, right? So it's such a conundrum. I don't have an easy answer for that, except that We just day by day try to do a little bit better for the folks who walk through our doors than we did the day before, understanding that some days it'll be 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But I think with intention and with investment of time and energy, how can it be worse?
Looking for the inside scoop on payroll? Whether you're a payroll pro or just curious about your paycheck, we've got 2 podcasts you cannot miss. It's About Payroll delivers the latest trends for payroll pros, and It's About Your Paycheck is here for employees, breaking down pay and rights in simple terms. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts, and endless insights to keep you informed and empowered. Subscribe now and elevate your payroll knowledge. Brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets people.
That is so well said. I want to talk a little bit about remote work because everybody's talking about remote work. I mean, can you have an HR conversation without it? So I feel like I'm going to tick this box. But in a lot of ways, it's very important because it's not remote work, it's flexibility. It's not remote work, it's autonomy. So talk to me about what you're seeing in the marketplace and maybe what you're doing at your organization to address some of these concerns about the new way of work.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's cracked the nut, but I got to say that mandates are not the way forward, right? Like I don't know what they're thinking, but I think that's just people wielding their power and making the world look like the way they see it, right? They think I'm here in the office 8 days a week, so you ought to also. And that's just ridiculous. And the statistics bear that out, right? People are applying to jobs that are remote first before they apply to others, even as the pool of those jobs is shrinking. And people are showing that either they're quitting or they're staying and disengaging. You tell me which one is worse. So you're right. It's absolutely about flexibility. I don't think we've experimented enough with shortened work weeks, with work hours that are more bespoke to your personal schedule. Like I'd rather start at 11 o'clock in the morning and then work till 7 o'clock at night. I'd rather, work 6 a.m. to 3 o'clock so I can catch my kids off the bus. I don't think we've done enough of that. There are pockets of that experimentation, but I still think we're clinging on a world that has gone, that will not exist. I have children of my friends who have never set foot in an office. Like they graduated from college and they don't even they don't know what a fax machine is, right? Like they just and 75% of the workforce in the next 5 years will be millennials and Gen Z. And if we don't adopt, then the shortage of good labor is going to be even more short than it is now. So people who think it's about where people can be productive can only be in the office are just completely missing the boat.
I think you're right. And I just read an article, and I can't remember where it was, Bloomberg or Business Insider, about foreign companies swooping in and hiring remote US workers because they recognize that they are so disaffected and so disengaged. And they're willing to create a work environment that's completely remote and completely asynchronous for these talented US based employees. And I just thought that is the global economy coming to fruition. I don't know. What do you think about that strategy? I mean, it's a complete competitive disadvantage for the US, correct?
Right on. I think we do so much to put ourselves at a disadvantage. We don't like foreign workers to come, right? We artificially suppress the supply of people who are willing to work and bring skills that we don't have. So we could talk all day, Laurie, about the things that we do to put ourselves at a disadvantage, but that's definitely one.
Heck yes. And also childcare. I mean, of all the things to just be still myopic about in the workplace, the fact that we don't have good childcare and affordable childcare here in America, along with paid leave and all the other things. But childcare specifically is like one obvious festering wound in our workforce, and we're not solving for it. I don't know. Does that come up in a lot of your conversations with individuals?
I think that we do a pretty good job at accommodating parents, whether they're adopting, whether or not they're, what you might now call a non-traditional family. 2 dads, 2 moms, a single parent, a grandparent taking care of a child, right? We're trying to make space for all of those families because we know that if we take care of them, they'll take care of us.
Well, I like that your organization is taking that approach. I was just thinking in general, as a human resources leader, I don't go a week without hearing someone complain about childcare. I don't go a week without someone telling me what they're currently paying. And I do not have children. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I cannot appreciate the expense just for the honor of going to work. It makes no sense to me. I don't know. You mentioned
Well, that's why remote work, right, for those organizations that impose a mandate, disproportionately affects moms because they are still traditionally the child caregiver, the homemaker, all of those things, right? Those responsibilities still tend to fall on the shoulders of the mom or the wife. And so, yeah, that imbalance is something that's been longstanding, and I don't see that being solved anytime soon either.
Well, as we start to wrap up the conversation, I'd love to get some closing thoughts on the future of human resources, the function. And it's so, as we just had in this conversation, it's so tied to work, power, politics, money. Like HR sits at the center of that intersection. So when you think about the future of HR, what do you think of?
Well, it makes a lot of sense that we would be at the center, right? Because everything we do is about people, and people are messy and they have needs and they are unique. And increasingly, they're using their voice and their wallets and their feet to express how they feel about that. So I think the future of work has got to be much more around meeting the employee where they are. What are their needs? How do they learn? Where do they want to work? When do they want to work? What are their ambitions? What are their aspirations? So, for example, they care somewhat that an organization pays fairly, but what they really care about is that they're paid fairly, right? They think it's great that, that you spend however many millions on learning and development, but you're not meeting my learning and development needs. So it's really about understanding at a really specific and granular level what they need. And that's hard to do, but organizations that don't start to really customize and cater to those individual experiences, they're going to lose that talent. So I think that's the future.
Well, I'm excited to hear that keynote on hyper-personalization. I think that's coming along quite nicely. So I'm ready. I'm ready to see that on TV. That's amazing. Well, you do such great work in our field, and I'm so proud that you came on the podcast today. If people want to learn more about you, where should we send them?
I am the only Angela Cheng-Cimini on LinkedIn, so I should be easy to find at Harvard Business Publishing. And please do reach out and let me know that you heard me speak with Laurie Rudiman on the Punk HR podcast, and I'll happily accept.
Well, I'm so pleased that you joined us today. Thanks again for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Punk Rock HR. Show notes and more can be found on punkrockhr.com. This episode was expertly produced by Emerald City Productions, and we would all appreciate it if you left us a 5-star review. So go to wherever you stream your podcasts like Apple or Spotify or iHeartRadio and leave that 5-star review and your thoughts on the episodes themselves. Now, that's all for today, and I really hope you enjoyed it. We will catch you next time on Punk Rock HR.